Full frame is a thing that's, of course, everyone knows about in still photography, right? Because you have a larger sensor, because normally the film ran sideways in a still camera. So when we created digital, we try to emulate that size too. But it's interesting for feature films or for filmmaking. We always had film that ran up and down, 16 millimeter or 35. So the film plane couldn't be as wide, obviously. So we were all used to using a crop sensor, quite frankly, for a very, very long time. But now we're starting to see this whole new resurgence and idea of full frame cameras that are for cinema.
Your source for news from NAB 2018. Indie Shooter. Brought to you by Akidio, Band Pro, Blackmagic Design, Carl Zeiss, Panasonic, and Schneider Optics.
Hi, Clint with Indie Shooter, continuing on our coverage of NAB 2018, here with Snehal Patel at Carl Zeiss. And one of the things that's come out in the show, full frame sensors and cinema cameras. And Zeiss makes the only cine zooms that cover full frame, is that right?
Not the only ones, but definitely the first. And it actually is a native full frame zoom lens designed to be that way. And we have 3 in the series. So these are the CZ2s, the cinema zooms. We have 15 to 30, which is right back here on the Venice, and 28 to 80 and a 70 to 200. And absolutely, we've been covering full frame since 2009, actually. Yeah. So full frame is a thing that's, of course, everyone knows about in still photography, right? Because you have a larger sensor, because normally the film ran sideways in a still camera. So when we created digital, we try to emulate that size too. But it's interesting for feature films or for filmmaking. We always had film that ran up and down, 16 millimeter or 35. So the film plane couldn't be as wide, obviously. So we were all used to using a crop sensor, quite frankly, for a very, very long time. But now we're starting to see this whole new resurgence and idea of full frame cameras that are for cinema or for cinematic applications. And they really provide you a different scope in terms of the image size that you get, what you can see in the frame, how you can frame, what people look like, using different focal lengths. It changes a lot of things, and it makes it very interesting, because I think it gives the artist, the cinematographer, a lot of choices that they didn't have before by having cameras like the Venice, for example. And this camera, just like a lot of the others, has multiple modes of recording, right? So if you're cropped down to Super 35 size, then you're still getting 4K, and then if you go to full frame size, you get 6K. So not only do you have choices, in choosing lenses, you actually have choices on set. You can say, well, I kind of want to punch in just a little bit, and reframe, but still use the same focal length, for whatever reason, because it looks a certain way, it has a certain curvature to it. So I think it's pretty neat that there are a lot of choices out there, and people that have tested or done full frame kind of work in the past, like VistaVision on VistaVision film, or on a Red camera, because the VistaVision size sensor, the larger sensor, has been out for quite some time now. We're starting to see some very unique, interesting applications. So.
Well, and when we talk about that it has full frame coverage, meaning you're not going to see a vignette, you're not going to see an aberration or anything like that on the side.
Correct. Well, it depends on the sensor size. Because, when people say full frame or large format, there's no standardization. So if you notice, Sony's sensor is 24 by 36 for the Venice, but the Alexa LF, for example, is actually a little bit wider and not as tall. And Canon C700, same thing, a little bit wider, not as tall. And the Red Monstro VV, definitely a lot wider and not as tall. So then it actually comes down to, okay, not only what sensor did I use, but what mode of recording. So on the Monstro, if you did full 8K recording and put one of our 15mm lenses on, or the 15 to 30, you might see some dark at the edges if you're using the full frame recording. But if you then extracted a 240 extraction or 178 from that, then that black is gone, or the darker image is gone. Or if you reduce the resolution very slightly to 8K widescreen or 8K HD, for example, where you lose some of the pixels on the left and right, and it kind of takes a little bit, crops the sensor on the left and right a little bit, then it covers the full thing. So we're very careful about what we say. We cover full frame for sure, which is 24 by 36 for sure. We do have certain coverage beyond that, but then it becomes a matter of taste. Some cinematographers are okay with darkening, a little bit of darkening of the edge, some are not. So what I always suggest is 2 things. First of all, identify what sensor you're using and make sure that your lens can cover it. But number 2, you should be testing, because there's no concrete answers to this question, unfortunately.
Now, back in the day when we were doing DSLRs and worrying about those things, we were dealing primarily with converting PLs to EF mount. So I mean, Zeiss has always had the ability to convert, and that hasn't changed with the cinema cameras either, because the Sony C700 FF uses the locking EF mount, but also comes in PL, right?
Correct. Yeah. So then you're starting to see that even those people that that want to have you use their lens, like it would make sense if you bought a Canon camera that you would use a Canon lens with it. I mean, I'm sure that's part of the trick, right? Is that what you want to do, especially on the still side. But you can't really do that in cinema. Because in cinema, cinematographers choose lenses, maybe every job they do, they're going to choose a different manufacturer.
Depending on the tone.
Depending on the tone, look, is it a period piece, is it sci-fi? I mean, Roger Deakins is really one of the only exceptions where he will only use a Master Prime lens and a Alexa Studio camera. That's his combo. And then what he does is he creates looks by using filtration, having onset color so that he can create looks by using LUTs, and then being in the color timing session and being a big part of how the image is created. So that's his method of doing it. But everyone has different methods, and some people like using the lens to create that look. Well, so that I can never say to a cinematographer that I have the lens for every job that you do. That would be a misnomer. That'd be very dishonest of me. In my honest opinion would be that, or the honest way to say it, I think, is that, hey, I have a paintbrush for you. If it applies for your job, then this might be the right thing. So therefore, cameras have to have a little bit of malleability, right? So a lot of these cameras have PL mount option, so you can use a PL lens, which makes it ubiquitous. But that also confuses the market, because you can have a PL lens that's for a crop sensor, and you can have a PL lens that's for full frame. Because remember, Canon used to have a different mount altogether if you were using a crop sensor camera. If you're using a 7, instead of a 5D, if you're using a 7D, you could use full frame lenses.
EFC or whatever it's called.
Or you could use that other crop sensor lens, but you can't use a crop sensor lens on a 5D. So they made it so that you couldn't make a mistake, right? Or that there was no confusion. But that doesn't really apply to cinema lenses. So again, I always think it's a two-step process. One, find out what your sensor size is and if the lens will be compatible. And then second, test to make sure it works the way that you want to. But yes, we do have, at least now in the industry, we have a lot of different choices, because cameras give you the choices for different mounts, and manufacturers like us, also on the lens side, we make the interchangeable mount system. So this particular zoom, for example, is currently in PL mount, but in 4 minutes you can change it to EF mount, F mount for Nikon, Micro Four Thirds, or even E mount for Sony.
Wow. And I mean, that's important, especially if you're going to make a purchase like this. You want that versatility.
Yeah, absolutely, because you think about the long term, because glass you have forever. I mean, one of the most popular lenses right now in the rental houses, that's a Zeiss lens, or is Super Speeds.
Oh, really?
Oh, every day, anytime I go to a rental house, the first thing that they say is, do you know where I can get parts for Super Speeds, or do you know anyone who has a used set? Because I didn't get yet another one, because it's one of the most popular rentals. And that's because they have unique looks. They have flaws that have, on the lens, because they're older, more of a vintage look, and they bloom, and they're decontrasted, and they're highlights, and they just give you a unique look that is built in. So you don't have to try to filter it or create it in post. It's just there for you. So yes, lenses last for a very, very long time. I mean, Zeiss lens, you can get 70, 80-year-old lenses that you can use for photography right now. And of course, you can get 30, 40, 50-year-old Super Speeds that you can use for cinema. So that means that when you make a decision on a camera, the camera is never going to be used for the period of time that a lens is. So I think it's very important for us to be future-proof. One, having larger coverage, which right now we're seeing is important. Glad we had it in 2009. It's coming into play right now. And secondly, having the interchangeable mount system and being ready for the future. So let's say now Alexa LF has come out. Our plan is to take advantage of their offer to license the mount to different manufacturers, so that we can also have an LPL mount on our lens as well, as if you want that as an option.
Now, you mentioned future-proofing, and that makes me think of the CP3s. How are they being received in the industry? They were announced last year at NAB and started shipping in the summertime last year, right?
Yeah, and actually over the last 2 months, we've been gathering a lot of user stories that have been using the CP3s, both the XDs and the normal CP3s. And the XDs, I think, biggest benefit that people saw was on set, because you're used to only on like maybe the master prime level having data coming from the lens. So now that you have that in the CP3s, it's really helping cinematographers, camera operators, and ACs. ACs love it because they don't have to program lenses. There's many ways to read the focus and iris position either through camera or through an external motor controller, and so they don't have to program lenses. They can move a lot faster. Secondly, a cinematographer can look up whatever exact lens they use, exact focal length, focusing distance, and iris that they use. So if 3 weeks later that they do a pickup shot or redo a shot, they can recreate that exact same tonality that they had before. And camera operators love it because it's small and light. So it's funny because nowadays camera operators can mean a lot of things, but camera operators can mean they use a gimbal. Camera operators can mean that they operate for a drone. Movi, yeah. So we're hearing from all those different cases like, wow, the weight really helps. It has a built-in, lens support in the exact right position. It's not touching anything else, so it's making it easier to use it. The front diameter is 95, and then on the other end of it, the cinematographers themselves and the filmmakers are giving us feedback that they appreciate the lens quality, that they really feel that the quality is stepped up and definitely improved slightly from CP2s.
Is there one story in particular where they used the technology within the lens that you can recall?
Well, of course, we did a film with Rocket Jump, which you were a big part of at our launch event, and they definitely use the XD technology. Right now, there's some use of that technology being used for live green screen knockout, because you have all these systems that can take a green screen and knock it out live on set while the actors are still there, right? And then now imagine that you could take the shading distortion characteristics of your lens and also put it on the background as well, or vice versa, so that you get a match between what you're seeing in the foreground and the background, the image that you're adding. So it's really interesting. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting time.
People need to keep in mind when they're looking at full frame cameras and then they're considering a zoom that they need to consider the Zeiss compact zooms.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, they're 5.5 pounds or so approximately. 3 of them, they're all T2.9 all the way through, so they're very cinematic. They have great size and shape. And actually, if you watch our lens comparison video that we have for the zooms, they stack up really well with the competition in controlling, distortion and being parfocal and having very, very reduced or just practically eliminated focus breathing. So it's been a really good winner for us, and the fact that it actually matches really well with any of our primes. So you can match it with, it's easier to match, let's say, when you're shooting with master primes and ultra primes, or CP2s or CP3s with the CZ2, than it would be trying to match a zoom from another manufacturer, let's say, to any of these lenses. So in that sense, it's been a really great benefit. And of course, as soon as full frame came out, people are right away asking for that wide 15 to 30 and the 28 to 80 because it helps fill in the gaps, when you're on set.
Lastly, for the folks in Los Angeles, there is a new place where people can see exclusively Zeiss lenses at your facility. Talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So if there's a cinematographer that would like to visit our office, we do have a small showroom. We have a place to talk and discuss, and we have a room where we can screen footage and samples as well. So if anyone wants to get in touch, they can by emailing me at snehal.patel@zeiss.com. And what we'll do is we can set up an appointment for them to come in and visit us, and we love to have them. So cinematographers in Los Angeles, or if you're visiting Los Angeles, please let me know.
Excellent. And people want to find out more about Zeiss. What is the website? Zeiss.com/Cine, CINE. And over there, you just choose which lens that you want to get more information on. We have specs there, we have video samples, we have downloads, like for the XD technology, for example, and the user stories. So now we link, even through our webpage, all the user stories. So you asked that question, like, who's using the lens? Well, guess what? We got user stories, and we have videos and pictures behind the scenes, so you can see how they're being used in the field.
Your source for news from NAB 2018. Indie Shooter. Brought to you by Akidio, Band Pro, Blackmagic Design, Carl Zeiss, Panasonic, and Schneider Optics.